In this podcast, we're joined by Ben Rising and Mike and JJ Dukart, and we're talking about some advanced communication tactics like doe relief. What is doe relief? Kind of a unique way of thinking and just an overall way to approach deer when you're communicating throughout the season.
The Deer Society podcast is brought to you by Illusion Hunting Systems, Onyx Hunt, Reveal Cellular Cameras, 10-Point Crossbows, Prime Archery, Loophole Optics, G5 Broadheads, Osseo Gear, Raw Frozen Scents, and HHA.
So let's jump right into it. Doe relief is a topic that most people probably have never heard of, and I can't say before, Ben, you started talking about it, that I've ever heard the term doe relief. So let's just dive right into that. What is doe relief?
So, all right, and people can maybe think, okay, now this guy's getting too technical or whatever, like making something. But so if you think about it, so like when does are really getting harassed, and this really works good here because, you know, Illusion Systems is built all around communicating with deer. And I pride myself on being able to like really communicate with deer and understand deer and like what they're doing. A lot of people accuse me that like, you know, Ben just thinks like a deer. Like that's what he does. When he steps into the timber, he's just thinking like a deer. And I kind of feel like I am that way at times too. Like I just try to just, you know, put myself in that position. But, you know, we've all seen, if you've hunted any length of time during any kind of rut phase, you've surely seen a doe getting literally harassed to death by a buck, you know. I've seen does running through the woods blowing. You're thinking, what the heck's going on? And then there's just bucks behind her. Like she's, you know, like blowing, you know, the alarm, like, you know, she's scared, but it's just bucks behind her just running her to death. And so like my theory on the doe relief is, you know, and this played out on a hunt last year when you've got a buck or two or a couple bucks just really pushing a doe hard, you know, and she's not ready. She doesn't want to breed yet, or she's just not ready to breed, but they're not letting up on her because she's starting to smell. You know, they want some relief. Like they need a break. They need to rest. They need, you know, and one of those ways, if you happen to be like in a buck nest, what we talked about on the one podcast, or, you know, in a bedding area or somewhere, and you happen to experience this, sometimes you can get them deer close to you because during the rut, like we all know, like the activity can just be, you can have a deer patterned all you want, but that doesn't mean anything when the seeking and rutting phase is on and like deer just running rampant, moving does through the timber. You might be in the best tree in that whole spot, but they're running that doe over there because she's just running rampant, just trying to, you know, they're just chasing. But one thing you can do is like literally call to that doe, let her know there's other deer in the vicinity, you know, whether it's a doe bleat, couple doe bleats to her. And then when you get her attention, and if she starts to come to you, you know, or notices you're there, and if you grunt also, two things can happen. One, it can irritate the buck that's with her, or it can make her realize, okay, like there's another buck over there. Like I can go over there and maybe he's going to start chasing me too. But I think adult does kind of have the understanding that these two bucks are probably going to fight, or it's going to occupy their time a bit. She can either slip out or she can get a break at least from all this action, take a breather, and it just works. You know, I've seen it happen multiple times when I've had does being chased or a lot of flurrying activity going on, you know, calling to a group of does or a doe or whatever. If she's able to hear you, a lot of times you can get her to get close to you and it'll drag them bucks right by, you know, and maybe there's a target buck there and you want to shoot it. It can pay off. I'm not going to say it's going to work every time, but that's my theory of, you know, doe relief. I mean, I don't know, you know, I've just seen does literally. I watched a doe one time. I was on a logging job and we was on the landing. We were finishing, we were getting ready to take lunch and this particular job, we were actually pulling the treetops out with the logs, and we typically don't do that, but there was an area the guy wanted to clear for a food plot. So we were pulling the trees out of this 2-acre spot with the treetops intact, and we were cutting the treetops off on the landing and pushing them in a pile. And he was just going to burn them or cut them up for firewood later or whatever. Well, we had this giant mountain of treetops, and we were watching this buck down in the sand quarry just run this doe to death for like 30 minutes. They were down there he was just chasing this doe all around. She heard us up there working, running saws, whatever. That doe literally ran to us. She come up out of that sand quarry up to us, walks between me and the skidder driver. We're standing there. Skidder's running. We're talking. And this doe walks literally to us, almost like help me. Like walks right to us and tries to crawl under the trees, the treetops. She's literally trying to crawl in this brush pile. And this buck comes right up, does not give two craps, walks right between me and Billy and goes right to that deer and just starts horning her in the rear end, trying to get to her. And obviously we ran the buck off then, but he just stayed out there. Like I guarantee you after we left the job that evening, it commenced again, because she was still in that top when we left, but she was just wore out. Like they're just relentless. I mean, I've seen them, and I've seen bucks early before the rut's really, really going on. And I've seen those younger bucks that are just amped up and excited chasing does with fawns still. Like the fawns, she hasn't pushed the fawns off yet because she isn't ready. And I've literally seen them horn the fawns because the fawns don't know what's going on.
Right.
They're like, what do you do? Mom, what, literally like, I've watched them just get irritated and, they're just like, dang, man, like nature's brutal. But I've seen it happen. I'll never forget the first time I ever watched it. It ticked me off. I was like, you sucker, you walk over here, I might freaking thump your ass, And I was just like, it was just irritating to watch. Like, the doe, the little fawn just didn't know what was going on, And his mom was being run to death up and down this soybean field. And finally that little fawn just kept getting too close, and that buck, it made him mad, and he just didn't kill it, but it hurt it,
I think it's a real thing.
Oh,
I think it's a real thing for sure. Just look how desperate they are, and they're just trying to. The point that she went up to known human activity.
Oh yeah, and this was a remote area.
Is the point?
Yeah, these weren't suburban deer. Like
yeah.
Like she probably had two things on her mind: shoot me or relieve me. Like scare, just one of the two. Like it was. So
So what communication scenario give us some examples of the thought process. What would you do to maybe have a doe like that come check you out?
Well, so like I just basically just do doe bleats. Like I'll take the extinguisher and just put it on the doe, and I'm just let her know that like, and if she can hear it, depending on the commotion, and what's going on, if she can hear it and work her way to you, or like, what do you think about it? So like a human in distress, say you're getting chased by a murderer, and all of a sudden you hear somebody else go, hey,
over here,
what's up? Where are you going to go? Like you're going to run to that other human voice. Why wouldn't it be the same for a deer?
So do you throw a buck in there or not?
Well, it just depends. Like, I will, like, if that doe's coming right at you and if it's the buck you want to shoot and he's just hot on her and he's moving, then I don't think you do too much. You just wait.
Right.
But if he's held up or she's not quite doing what you want, then sometimes I'll try to work the buck.
Gotcha.
Just like if you're within a certain distance, sometimes them bucks then will move too, to just come over and like brace you.
Yeah, is he coming after her?
Yeah, and so it might be just enough to get that shot that you need. He's not going to leave her completely, but it might be enough for him to like, I got to get on this side of her because there's a buck here and I don't see him.
Cut him off.
Yeah. I got to protect. I don't want him getting her. And so they come over there, braced up, ears laid back, and that's where a snort weasel work too. Like, especially if they can't see you,
Well, yeah, like we talked about on a buck nest breakdown and the doe relief situation from your hunt last year. You did some calling. You got 3 does. I think it was 3, right?
Mhm.
They came right in below you.
Yeah.
You knew that there was a buck back there chasing. And once you got those does in, like it's just a matter of time, as long as you don't bump them,
Mm-hmm.
you just sat out there,
Yep.
communicated, snort wheeze. There was other bucks circling,
Yep.
and he was snort wheeze and grunt.
He was
pushing
he
them
was the
off.
bigger. There was a couple smaller ones around.
But it's like those does just sat under you, just kind of looking around, like, okay, where's everybody?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just not our time.
And they started to actually nibble. Like I was watching the one out of the corner of my eye, just picking some leaves, and she's just like. But the buck was the same way. Like even on the trail cam video, you can see his sides just because he walked right through the scrape where I monitor. You know, he walked right through there. And I mean, I honestly think he was like, oh, okay, like I can take a breath now too, you know, but he knew that he might have to fight because those other bucks were around. And, you know, it was just one of those mornings you live for. Like this is the rut. Like when you think of the rut, this is what you think of. You think of buck flurry activity and deer running everywhere and had the best day of my life, you know, and a lot of times the rut is not that way. Mm-hmm. Like it's sometimes is very disappointing, but this happened to be one of those classic scenarios that, you know, by 8:30, I think I saw 7 bucks, you know, so.
I think one of the the cool things about this, so like doe relief and what you're hearing here is this is a next level thought process of communication. So, you know, Mike, JJ, Illusion, you know, you guys have built this company and products around not just calling, but communicating with deer. You've studied them forever. Ben, you obviously have tons and tons of experience. You know, this is all about the next level of thinking when it comes to how do I communicate with these deer? What are they thinking about? How do I talk to them and how do I get them closer? It's not just going out there and using the extinguisher and throwing a buck run out there. It's really that thought process of overall communication and, hey, how do I talk to these deer to get them to do what I think that they want to do or I want them to do?
No. And one of go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to just to make a comment on the communicating part, you know, your comment about it's not just about throwing out a buck run or this and that. I mean, there's cold calling scenarios that, you know, you can use. But for the most part, especially today, because we talked about this earlier, times change. The animals change. They change their behavior to how they're being, you know, they know calls are out there. They know people are rattling them in. And so their behavior changes. And so if you understand the behavior piece of it and you can read that animal, and we learn this stuff from guys like Ben and you know, a lot of our pro staff throughout the years, and I think that's a direction I'd love to start going more. We're doing it right now. But learn these types of things and learn to read them, and it'll take you to that next level. And it's important that you're literally sounding like the deer, but also thinking like the deer, like Ben does. And you know, he just opened my mind to a scenario that I've experienced. And I didn't really look at it the way he's looking at it, but it's pretty much matches exactly what he's talking about. That actually happened to me. I just didn't perceive it that way. So communicating is understanding, you know, and just thinking like the deer.
Yeah, and like we were just talking about before the podcast, when I saw the footage, it clicked on what happened with my hunt last year. I didn't understand the whole doe relief situation. Had a hunt last year where I saw this doe a couple days in a row. She was super vocal. You could just hear her bleeding, walking through the fields, bleep, 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 mature doe. And I was set up to where the mature buck I was after was back in the swamp. And afternoon hunt, this doe came by me again, loud, like bleeding. And she walks back in there, and then I could tell she kicked up that buck in his first week in November. Same situation with your buck nest hunt. He kicks her up. You just hear the branches breaking, you know, crashing, running around. I've been seeing that for a couple of days where it was a real chase situation back in there. He's harassing her for a while, and I'm just like, well, what can I even do? Like, I don't even know what to do here to get this buck. He's on her. She's probably hot. I just started doing doe bleeds. And they were probably only 60 yards away at the time, so they can hear me.
Yeah, in your mind, you're thinking, I'm
Like,
going to
trying
see.
to get the buck.
You're trying to get the
I'm
buck
better
going.
though.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
like-
ready to breed.
Like, hey,
Yeah.
I'm prettier.
Yeah.
That's what
So that
you're
was my
thinking's
mindset.
happening. Yes, and then she moves first.
Yeah. So I did that, and I think I maybe did some buck runs too. I just can't, I'd have to look back at the footage, but I'm just thinking, like, what can I do? Like I'm not in a good place here with him, target buck on a hot doe. Like I'm not in a good spot here, especially when I'm towards open field. He came from cover. She's going to want to go toward cover. I did have standing corn, which I guess is some cover in front of me, but so I do that situation, and it's not 5-10 minutes where I kind of lose them for a while, and I can hear them back in there, and they're not that far, 60-70 yards. And then they just like show up behind me, and the doe is like 15 yards away, and the buck's like 10 yards away behind me, and she walks, and she's just right there nibbling in this little thicket right next to me.
This is where it was. This is
and that's the thing. Like you got to remember, they're social animals, and so like that scenario doesn't sound like she was being run to death.
No,
but she was just not ready yet, or that buck, she would have never left that buck or even walked her dry if she was ready to breed.
Or did she feel like challenged? Like, well, I'm really the chirp.
Well, I mean
that's a possibility.
It could be,
for sure.
But I think too, it's just like she was just in that area, and like maybe it was just like okay, but she eventually came to the exact sound of where you were at. It's just like turkeys. I mean, how many times have you hunted a gobbler and you've, the very first spot you called from, but then you move, you think, oh, I got to move. Yep. He's not doing what I want to do.
Yeah.
And, too much time has passed, and then he shuts down and you're like, son of a gun, and then all of a sudden, and he's right where you were at the very first.
Sneaking in on you.
But the does are I just think they're very social. Like in the right mood. But like I said, if she was completely 100% ready to breed, she probably would have just bred with him and been done, and they'd be locked up together.
And they'd walk together
and stick together like not really. Yeah. Because I've had that happen too, where it wasn't going to work. Like, I've had it not work, but it's just one of those tools in your arsenal that can make a difference. It's just something to keep in mind. But again, you have to it's not just, I'm going to walk out in the woods and I'm going to just start blowing my call and, a doe's going to come find me and drag a buck in. Like, you've got to be hunting the right areas. You've got to be hunting the right winds. You've got to, like in this scenario, especially when I'm hunting bedding areas, like I'm very big on, the cover scent, having some doe smell in the air, like I'm, I use, everybody that watches me knows I use black widow deer lures, and I'm big on the doe matriarch, spraying it in the air, keeping it at that time of year. And just like them does that were downwind of me in that buck nest hunt, I mean, they were downwind, like they were getting, and I had a buck behind me and none of them would nail me. And I think it's a testament also to combining the phase system, using the phase products, keeping your body odor as under control as you can, adding a little bit of natural smell of a deer that's just not over, powerful. It's not some, it just, all those little factors combining, I think, can make the difference of whether you're putting an arrow through a deer or not.
Yeah, and like the Wisconsin hunt where I called the doe and she eventually comes to 15, 20 yards on my left. Well, the buck, I wanted him to just follow her because that's the perfect distance, They keep just perfect shooting distance. You can get drawn, whatever. Well, he's behind me and he starts doing the click. And hopping. It's just 5-10 minutes of just vocalizations directly downwind. Then again, phase saving my butt. But I think outside of him just being so locked on that doe, if it was an early season hunt, because I could see his white patch, like, so I know he's doing this.
Yeah, head up.
Right behind me, 10 yards, wind blowing at him. Maybe early season when has time, maybe he figures me out. But with that doe over there, and then she finally breaks, he goes with her.
Has to.
So, scent control was obviously key, but I think time of year where he's just locked on that doe, somehow I got her called in with maybe doe relief, maybe not, maybe curiosity, maybe community calling, but ended up.
And on that point, I've done something similar where a buck was on a doe, but they were, in conjunction with each other. It wasn't like a heavy, hard chase. I've used the fawn bleat when she's in a mild manner, emotional phase. The fawn bleat, little distressy, that got her curiosity to come up. And people send us stories about stuff like this too. how they're calling the doe in and the buck followed. I didn't think you could do that. And so it's a real thing.
Yeah, whether it's relief or curiosity or
Or a combination, you know.
yeah.
I think when it comes down to it, it's, doe relief, again, it's just an example of, a way of thinking. It's thinking like the deer. It's thinking about how you're going to communicate. And overall, just when you're out there and you're putting yourself in the right scenario and communicating, thinking about how you're going to do that with the deer in that scenario, you're just bettering your odds. Does it work every time? No, it doesn't work every time. But if you can put those odds in your favor, you have a lot better chance, Ben, like you said, of putting an arrow in that deer versus not. So doe relief, really cool concept. Think about that when you're out there hunting and just scenarios like that, whether it's doe relief or something else. What are the deer doing? How can you interact with them and get them to do what you want them to do? So appreciate you tuning in. Doe relief, take it, talk about it. Maybe you've experienced it and not even realized it. But a cool topic. Ben, thank you for bringing it to light. And guys, look for that hunt breakdowns from Ben coming up here in the following weeks. And appreciate you tuning in.
The Deer Society podcast is brought to you by Illusion Hunting Systems, Onyx Hunt, Reveal Cellular Cameras, 10-Point Crossbows, Prime Archery, Loophole Optics, G5 Broadheads, Osseo Gear, Raw Frozen Scents, and HHA.